Hey, good morning to everybody. Happy Monday. It's Daryl here. It's bright and freaking early, man. It's 3 a.m. here in Connecticut on the East Coast. Okay, today I talk about this every year on the 4th of July or a day or two before the 4th of July. And I'm going to talk about one of the worst days of my life. And one of the reasons I'm clean and sober now. It's one of the last days that I ever relapsed. And every year on the 4th of July, or about a week before, I remember this day from 18 years ago. I'm coming up on 18 years clean and sober. I was a full-blown crack and heroin addict. And I'm going to tell you guys, let me give you an overview of what I'm going to talk about here. This is something I am not proud of, but it was one of the last days. It was such a bad day. Such a bad relapse that it led to me getting clean and sober for the last 18 years. So it's kind of a bittersweet memory, but I'm ashamed and embarrassed of a lot of the stuff I did on that day. Let me give you an overview. This happened on July 4th, July 2nd, July 3rd, July 4th, the relapse I had. I've said this before, it's my own personal opinion that relapse is part of recovery. I think most people do. You shouldn't expect it. You shouldn't use it as an excuse that, to relapse. But in my opinion, I think relapse is part of recovery. Looking back at the times I relapsed, it led to me being clean and sober. This day on July 3rd, 4th, and 5th, July 3rd, July 2nd, 3rd, and 4th of 2006 were some of the worst, most bizarre days I've ever had. And I still remember them, and it's one of the reasons why I'm clean, why I'm so thankful. And I remember every 4th of July for the last 18 years, I remember what happened on this day. Okay, like I said, recovery is part of, I think relapse is part of recovery for me, like I said, because this was such a bad day. I went into St. Francis Hospital, and this was a detox in Hartford. And usually they only keep you for 5 days. And this was such a good detox. The head doctor there, this Romanian doctor, asked me to stay for 30 days. She checked with my insurance company because I really wanted to get clean and sober. I had been through 13 detoxes at this time. So she asked my insurance company to keep me in this detox and turn it into kind of a rehab. So I stayed in this detox for 30 days, okay? And I actually, the NA counselors there had me run the NA meetings every night at 7 o'clock. I would be the head. I would run the NA meetings. And it had such an effect on me that I actually got clean and sober. And I relapsed in July, right before the 4th of July, July 2nd, 3rd, 4th. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. And then I relapsed again on October 22nd, 23rd, and that was the last time I ever relapsed. So the last two relapses, and I've been clean and sober since October 23rd of 2006. But this day, I talk about this every year because the 4th of July reminds me of this every single year. And it's kind of bittersweet because this was such a terrible day. And let me give you an overview. I was using every day. I was a full-blown addict, smoking crack and using heroin, snorting heroin every single day, drinking. Like I've told you guys before, I would get up at 8 o'clock every single day. As soon as the package store opened, I'd buy a half pint of Jägermeister, and I would drink that for breakfast. I'm not being, I'm not making a joke. I'm not trying to make a story here, but that's what I did every day. That was, I didn't drink water, I didn't eat food, I actually just consumed alcohol and drugs. It's a miracle that I'm still alive today. And the point of this video is recovery is possible, by the way. And in this town, there was, I found other people that were partying. Of course, you run into other people that are using drugs. And there was a guy that I went to school with, and he was a few years younger than me, and he didn't have a permanent place to stay, and he was bumming. He was living with some girls I knew a couple blocks over, and he wanted to come live with me because I had a 2-bedroom place, a 2-bedroom apartment. And I was at a point in my addiction that I just wanted to be by myself, and I was selfish, and I didn't want anybody around, and I had no intention of really letting him move into my spare bedroom at this point. But I used him because I knew he had a severe head injury back in his 20s, and every month he got a large amount of money, and he got a large amount of pain pills, and he would spend it all on drugs every month. And I wanted to use him for this. I mean, I hate to admit that. And it turns out that he was a cross-dresser. And this led to some of one of the weirdest days I've ever had on the 4th of July. And then what I did to him, I'm not proud of. All right. So like I said, I ended up letting him move in like 1 or 2 days before he was due to get his money for the month and his allotment of pain pills. And I let him stay with me. I had no intention of, I'm ashamed to say this, but I was just using him. And I let him move in and or stay with me, to use up his money and his pain pills and all that. And we were on the July 3rd, 2006. We were smoking crack all day, all night for like 48 hours, 2 or 3 days straight. And I didn't know this before he moved in, but when he got high, I've talked about this in other videos, and if you've probably heard of this, that crack or methamphetamines, when a lot of guys use this, they have bizarre sexual urges. It really hypes up. It gives you hypersexuality. It makes you very sexual. I mean, you get these ideas in your head that you would never ever. It's a hypersexual state. And this guy, as soon as he would use, he would go upstairs. He'd take his first hit or two when the dealer would come, drop it off, bunch of big rocks, all his pain pills, his oxys, and he would go upstairs and he'd come back down and he would have women's makeup on, lipstick. Of course, he'd look like a guy, but he'd have makeup on, eyeshadow, lipstick. He'd have a bra on with like a halter top over it. And I remember wearing panties and stockings and some kind of like shorts or something, like Daisy Duke shorts, coming down the stairs. And it made for a bizarre sight. And my addiction was so bad at this point that I just overlooked this. I mean, I had some freaky habits of my own. I was addicted to pornography. So this led to us, sitting around the living room for days, for hours and days around the 4th of July. And the whole house was trashed. There was nothing but paraphernalia and garbage and everything strewn all over the house. My apartment. And he's all dressed up like a woman, and he would call. We were up for days, and he would call the dealer to stop at my house. And this guy was called Q, this dealer, because he drove a Q Infinity, I think it was, and it was a black gentleman. And he would pull up in front of the house, and he was straight. Most dealers don't use their own product, and he was straight. And it really freaked me out because I was like, "Aren't you going to change? You're going to wear that? You're going to look like that when this guy walks in?" And he'd be like, "Yeah, he's used to it, because this guy just wanted his money. He didn't care, how bizarre he looked." So the dealer would come in, and and there's pornography and everything spread all across the apartment, and this guy is dressed up with mascara and everything, and my house is destroyed. So I've got a dealer sitting on my couch. This is the 4th of July, the morning of the 4th of July, and I see my next door neighbors having barbecues, fireworks and everything, and inside my house it's dark and dank and it stinks, and there's a guy dressed up as a woman, a black gentleman that's a dealer, his car out in front, piles of rock cocaine on the table. And this is a residential neighborhood here in Connecticut, and there's all normal. And it was just such a difference. It was so bizarre to me. Like, it was almost like I was looking out at a movie when I peeked out the windows, and I saw my next door neighbors going about the 4th of July business. And inside the house, it was this bizarre drug use going on. And I wanted to get rid of him because we were running out of money. And I didn't want this guy staying. Once his money was gone after like 3 or 4 days, I didn't want this guy living in my house. I remember, after we would finish using or whatever, I'd go up into my bedroom and I would look under his door into the room that he was in, and I could see him moving around. And I could see the stockings, his nylon stockings that he was wearing, moving around underneath the spare bedroom door. And I didn't know what he was doing in there, and I didn't want to know. And okay, so it's the 4th of July, and we're running out of party supplies and money. And I decided to make up this lie that I was like, "Oh my God, I forgot. My family's coming over today." I was like, I gotta get rid of you. You gotta go somewhere for a couple hours while my family comes over. And this was a lie. I just wanted to get rid of him. So he said, he agreed to it. And he packed up the little amount of money and drugs he still had. And I drove him. I got him in the car. It was about maybe 11 in the morning on the 4th of July, 2006. And I drove him about 4 or 5 miles to the state park where I grew up. And there's people all picnicking and fishing and stuff like that. And I drove him to a secluded area in the park. And I dropped him off near, like, there's caves and stuff. So I said, just stay up here in the woods and I'll come back and get you in like an hour or two. There was no cell phones then. So he had no cell phone or no way of communication or anything like that. And he's still wearing women's clothes. He's wearing these like short women's shorts, nylons, the makeup, a halter top, and he's walking into the state forest with his drugs and his money. And I drop him off, and I have no intention of going back to pick him up. And I'm not, I'm embarrassed and ashamed of what I did to this guy. Regardless of how deep into drugs he was, it was a terrible thing to do to another human being. Because what was he going to do? He had no way out of that state forest. And there was all people. There was cops and state workers and all the people in the park. And he's dressed as a woman with all of his supplies on him. And I just ditched him in the woods. Apparently, he walked by that night, I had calmed down and I lay down in bed. It was about 9 or 10 o'clock at night. It was about 10 hours later. And he managed to get back to the house. And I had locked the door. Locked all my doors, and I put all of his stuff out on the front porch. So I figured sooner or later he would show back up. And I heard a window smash, and he was breaking back into the house, even though his stuff was on the front porch. And I freaked out, and I went and grabbed a baseball bat. This is all a true story. One of the last days I relapsed, and I came running out of the house screaming, and I chased him down the street. 10 o'clock on the 4th of July, fireworks going off, people standing outside, and I chased him down the street with a baseball bat. And I didn't actually hit him. I hit the telephone pole next to him, and he was on the ground. Please don't, please. People were watching. I go back to my house, and the cops come very quickly. And the cops ended up thanking me, believe it or not. And it made me feel even worse. Because he had warrants. He had some serious felony warrants. So they pulled up, they found him first, and they took him in custody. Then they came to my house, and I just kind of gave him a short story. Like, he came in here, he was using, and I threw him out. Look at him. He's all dressed as a woman, and they we got to thank you. We've been looking for this guy. We've been looking for him all over the place. Thank you, Daryl. Thank you for, we're glad we caught him. Have a good night. And that just made me feel even worse. Because of what I did and how I had a part in all this and everything. And he actually, I got clean and sober after that. I relapsed one more time on the October 22nd, 23rd. That was the last time I ever used for the last 17 years and 8 months. He actually called me up. I think it was probably about 6 months later. And he didn't even bring up that whole incident. He wanted to come over and use again. And I said, stay away from here. I am clean and sober. I want nothing to do with that. And he actually said this. He said, I'm clean and sober too. I just want to hang out. And this is when I found out that people will lie to you. I learned that when I say I'm clean and sober, everybody else says they're clean and sober, regardless if they're using or not. This is one of the times I learned that. So I had to be very careful. I knew that was going to be the response when I told people that were using, hey, I'm clean and sober. And they go, yeah, me too. You want to go use? And they would do that because they knew I had money and I'd been clean and sober for a while. So they would try to use me like I used this guy. And every 4th of July, I think back to this and this guy and what I did to him and how bizarre it was inside my house during this period. Like I said, the shades were drawn, the house stank, it was dirty, there was garbage and paraphernalia, there was a guy dressed as a woman, dealers, and outside there was all normalcy. My neighbors having picnics and fireworks, and it's like I could never get back. I felt so apart from normal society at that point. It was such a scary, I get a terrible feeling. I get anxiety right now just thinking about it. And that was one of the last times I ever used. And I'm still embarrassed and ashamed of everything I did that day. But I remember, how bad my life was. Recovery is possible. If you start using and messing around with this stuff, it didn't happen all at once. You know, I didn't become an addict overnight. You know, I thought I could handle it. I thought I could play around with it, and over time, it sucked me in, and there was no way out. Once you realize that you're so far in, there's no way out. You can't, you know, like I said, I felt like I was on Mars compared to the people that I was looking at, you know, my neighbors outside my window. I could have been on Mars. It felt, you know, I was trapped in this literal, it was a literal hell that I was trapped inside of in this apartment. That was the 4th of July in 2006, one of the worst days I've ever had in my entire life, and one of the worst days and last days I ever used. And recovery is possible. Have a great 4th of July. I'll see you guys at the beach. I'm headed off to the beach, Connecticut and Rhode Island shore. I'll see you there. I'll be doing videos from there after today. Have a good Monday.